So, welcome back to Consistently Candid. I'm here with you, who is the founder of PauseAI. Do you want to introduce yourself, tell everyone a little bit about like how you ended up founding PauseAI and your kind of background?
Oh yeah. Hey, thanks for having me, Sarah. So I'm Joep Meindertsma. I am a software engineer. I have a company in Utrecht in the Netherlands. I've been working on databases and programming stuff, and I've been reading about AI and AI safety for maybe 7 to 8 years now. And basically, when GPT-4 came out, I was starting to get really, really worried because things are accelerating and going way faster than pretty much everyone had predicted. But I think everybody who's listening in here already fully agrees with that. Um, and that to me led to a feeling that I should do something. And I reached out to a bunch of people, including Otto Barter from the Existential Risk Observatory, and I got in touch with Johan de Kok and Alex van der Meer, a bunch of Dutch people who's also interested in AI safety and concerned about AI risks. And then we started doing our first protest. We organized a protest in Brussels, well, because Sam Altman was going to speak there, right, at Microsoft headquarters. He was like doing this global campaign where he's talking to all these politicians. So we thought, okay, we're going to protest there because Sam Altman is going to be there, and then we're going to meet a politician. So I also reached out to the European Commission, and I got a meeting there. And I basically said, hey, I'm very worried about X risk and AI. Can we have a meeting? Because right now your colleagues are talking to Sam Altman, and you need to hear like this different story as well, right? So that's basically how PauseAI started, and now we have a Discord with almost 1,000 people and maybe 15 protests up until now. There was one last week. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think of all the things that happened last year.
Yeah, yeah, that's like really impressive. It's like crazy what one person can do just by like paying attention and putting like a little bit of effort in, and you really can just like get like the ear of like really influential people. So that's really cool. Do you remember like I guess if it was like 7 or 8 years ago when you first learned about this, maybe you don't remember, but do you remember like what the first like kind of argument you encountered was, or like do you remember what convinced you that this was like worth worrying about?
hmm I think that was a video by Nick Bostrom. It was a TED video. I was like obsessed with watching TED videos, right? Because it's like so information dense and one of the better things because back then YouTube wasn't as good. Um, anyway, was watching this video about superintelligence. And Nick Bostrom was basically making this argument that, if we're going to make smarter and smarter systems, at some point it's going to be smarter than humans. And things that are very, very smart are very, very good at getting what they want. So if you have a machine that wants something, and that something is even slightly different from what humans want, then the machine gets its way, right? Because it's smarter. And like that argument to me, it's so incredibly simple. It makes so much intuitive sense that I was kind of surprised that I'd never thought of it before. But it took me like 7 years before I heard that argument, right? It took me 7 years after hearing that argument until I really started to feel that holy shit, this could like actually impact our world and my life and my family and my friends, right? So there's a big difference between understanding the argument and actually feeling that we could die because of this, right? How has that been for you?
Um, yeah, I guess. Well, I haven't been kind of in this as long. I think it was like must have been like summer 2023 that I first started encountering this stuff. And I think initially I found it quite like psychologically difficult to deal with, just because I was just kind of like I was like hunting around looking for like I was looking for like a consensus like on what was actually happening. Like I thought there would be some like established group of experts that had like figured out like what was actually going on, and I was like very disconcerted to discover that there wasn't that and that like nobody knew what was happening. So I found that like really destabilizing for a bit, but then eventually like I think you just adapt to like a new level of uncertainty, and it's kind of like your brain just can't be in that state of like panic like permanently, so you just kind of get used to it. I guess like it's like hedonic adaptation or whatever you
Yep,
call
yep.
it. So I think that's kind of happened, and now I like on the day to day I don't feel like uh emotionally negatively impacted by it, even though I think about it a lot. But I think it's like very useful to have a community of people that are also worried about it. Um, yeah, but it's interesting, like how I think that the emotional connection like doesn't happen for most people. Like even people who are like in the field and like work on it and like intellectually are sold on it being a problem. Like a lot of them don't make that leap to like really emotionally investing in it, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if you like have any thoughts on why that is, but
Yeah, that is fascinating, right? It's like there's this disconnect. I think there's like a pop, maybe a bunch of psychological reasons. So I think, firstly, it's very difficult to internalize that the thing you are working on could actually be very, very bad. You heard Joshua Bengio and Geoffrey Hinton, right? Two Turing Award AI winners who have like now become AI alarmists mostly, right? They've speak about this really, really clearly that they had like this, you know, psychological tendency not to look at it too much, not to be concerned too much, um,
Mhm.
because it's so confronting. I think that is part of why there's like a lack of alarmist action in the tech scene. I also think there's this other reason that working on technology and working on AI capabilities, maybe specifically, is just way more fun. And many tech people, just pursue like this intellectual interest of, just building things. And it's very rewarding to build things, right? It's very fun to build things and work on improving things and understanding things. And the whole stuff that needs to happen in order to prevent disaster is probably not that technical, right? At least I
Yeah.
do think that the alignment problem is a technical problem, but I think right now what we need is to pause, buy us some time, and in order to get there, right, in order to get that pause implemented, we don't need a technical solution. We need people to be loud, we need people to be convincing, we need people to be public, and there's like this culture in the whole AI safety scene that is kind of like shying away from speaking up. For a long time, it was like a huge taboo, right? Nobody wanted to say anything publicly because there was this idea that if you talk about AI safety and you talk about the dangers of AI publicly, well, maybe then people will start to pursue it, which is maybe also what kind of happened. But this tendency to basically shut up about it and don't talk about how bad things will go also meant that it took a long time for the public to notice that this stuff is actually very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this really odd like concern about doing things like protests and like public advocacy and like awareness and stuff, which like I really don't understand. It's almost like as if people think that the topic is so like nuanced and complicated that like normal quote unquote normal people are like never going to understand it and they're never going to be able to like
Yeah,
contribute
yeah.
in a constructive way, so we just like shouldn't tell them about it and just kind of like try and sort the whole thing out behind the scenes, which I think is like weird and like kind of condescending, like as one
Yeah,
of those like normal people who like doesn't have a tech background. um I still feel like I have a right to be included in the in the like conversation around something that is potentially going to impact me and like everyone I know. So
absolutely. We
I do
all
find
have a
that like a
right
little
to
bit strange.
be talking about this and be informed about what is going on. I also think it's pretty arrogant to think that normal people won't get it. And as polls and surveys have been showing quite consistently in the past year, is that people are in fact worried about AI, and many people do want to pause. So it's the problem isn't that the population isn't concerned, right? That's not the problem. Because
Mm.
like 70% of the people already want AI to be slowed down, only 8% want it to be sped up. But there's multiple polls showing this, so it's quite consistent. Um, the problem is that our intellectual political elites think that it is impossible and it's a huge taboo. And I think one of the reasons why people think this way, like why political elites think this way, is because of lobbying efforts. Because like these
Mm.
AI companies, Microsoft, they're spending tens of millions of dollars constantly talking to politicians. So I had a bunch of meetings with politicians, not that many, right? I'm like just a volunteer, I'm just a regular guy doing this. So I can't do this stuff, full time and be a professional lobbyist. But the professional lobbyists of these AI companies are talking a lot to politicians. So I had like this meeting with a parliament member last week, and he basically said to me, well, um, it's such a relief to not be talking to someone from big tech. That, to me, like that
Oh
explains
God.
so much, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's kind of incredible. Yeah, I feel like it's like, yeah, a lot of the time when you suggest the idea that we should have a pause, people's reaction to that is like, oh, that's like super naive. Like, you don't understand. Like, it's impossible for all of these reasons. But then the reasons are always like, they're like so ideological. Like, the idea that, like, say, AGI is inevitable. Like, why do we think that? Or like, you know,
Yeah, it's
I don't know. Like, just because it's crazy and it's just like everyone's just kind of accepted it, and I like can't really figure out why. Um,
I
yeah, it's
think
very
maybe it's a
fatalistic.
coping mechanism, right? Like if you think that pausing is impossible, that could be like in a way it's comforting because it always also means that you don't have to do anything, right? I mean, giving up, sticking your head in the sand, and there's basically two coping mechanisms that I see a lot. One of them is denial, like sticking your head in the sand and you just ignore the problem. You're like, okay, I'm not going to think about this, I'm not going to talk about this, it's just not real, right? People who say, oh, it's all science fiction, it's not going to happen, we'll be fine, that's kind of like denial. Then there's this other coping mechanism, which is like defeatism, right? It is giving up. You're not even trying to solve it. And the problem with defeatism is that it is very comfortable. It feels good because you don't have to actually do something, right? You can feel like, okay, we're fucked. We don't have to do anything. So, one of the first things that really got me in action was that I reached out to like the three smartest people that I know. One guy is like quantum programmer guy. One person who is working on building his own operating system, and another person who is like a Google AI engineer. And basically, most of them were saying that AI is very dangerous and this could kill us all, but also that they felt like there's nothing you can do to stop it. That to me was very scary. This idea that, people who are in fact concerned, that understand the problem, kind of like give up and don't try to do something. For me, that's like an extra reason. So, okay, I gotta do something. And it actually seems pretty achievable. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I honestly believe that there's a pretty large chance that we are going to pause because people are worried. There is a broad, support for pausing AI development. And it's like not the first time that internationally a technology has been banned, right? We've also banned stuff like blinding laser weapons. Nuclear weapons are regulated to a pretty high extent. I think with AI, the technology itself is so incredibly complicated. It's not as if, GPUs magically cluster themselves somewhere and anybody can just make it. No, you need very specific chips. You need billions or like millions of dollars. You need a lot of data. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of engineering effort. It's very difficult to build super intelligence. Nobody has ever managed to achieve it. So preventing that from happening in many ways is not that hard. The big issue is, of course, that you can make so much money by getting there. It's like it's spitting out gold until it kills us all, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm wondering like whether this is like to an extent like a language thing because I was listening to you probably know who Ian Bremmer is. He's like quite a famous like he's like a political scientist. I think at the moment he's doing quite a lot of work with Mustafa Suleiman on like AI policy stuff, and they've like co-written some articles about it. And I listened to a podcast interview with him the other day. I wish I could remember what podcast it was. If I remember, I'll link it. But he was talking about like how he's been, in the room where it happens with all of these like high-ranking officials from all of these countries all around the world, and he was saying like, you don't understand how far outside of the Overton window the pause thing is. He was like, it's just not like it's not even on the table. No one's discussing it. It's just everyone thinks it's totally unrealistic. And he's like, trust me, I've talked to all the people who know all the people, which I believe because he's like a pretty like I said, he's a pretty well connected guy. But then interestingly, later in the episode, the interviewer was like, well, what about this like compute cap idea? Like we just say no one can go beyond 10 to the 26 flop or whatever. And he was like, oh well, like I'm not a tech guy, but like maybe that's feasible. I don't know. Like, I'd have to look into it. And the interviewer was saying, yeah, because, compute is like traceable and like, for all of these reasons, it might be something that you can govern, blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, like, I think that's interesting because, like, the idea of pausing, he was out of hand, like, absolutely not going to happen. Then the idea of a compute cap, he was like, oh, I don't know, maybe. But, like, if you think about it, like, in practice, those two things could end up kind of being the same. Like, if you have a cap and we can't go beyond that, then we might end up having to pause capabilities at a certain level. So like sometimes I think like I think the pause thing is like really clear and useful to cohere around and like seems like a goal that everyone can understand what we mean when we say it. But sometimes people who are like more kind of like in the politics scene who have already written that off in their heads, they can be kind of like approached from another angle and you can sell them more easily on other stuff. Is kind of the impression I was getting from this, but I don't know what you think about that.
Oh, that's really interesting. That just changing basically the way you phrase it, that it changes people's opinions. So I think there is a large issue that people, who, when they hear the word pause, they have like their own way of thinking about what that means. I think some people, when they hear the word pause AI, they think we're just gonna stop using AI altogether, right? Like everybody stops using AI. That's obviously not what we're asking for. Indeed, we're asking for a compute cap. We're asking for proof of safety. We're asking for democratic control. And the second issue is that the FLI pause letter had a bunch of specific asks which people were critical of that we as PauseAI don't even ask, right? So FLI's pause letter was basically saying we need to halt AI development above this compute threshold, right? Which is pretty similar to what PauseAI is asking. But they were also saying this is a voluntary commitment from AI companies to do this for 6 months, right? So it's voluntary and it's temporary. And what PauseAI is asking for, what we are asking for, is something that is not voluntary, that's being enforced, and not on a national level, but on an international level through a treaty. So like the whole world can pause. And yeah, it can't be voluntary. It needs to be international. And we don't unpause unless there is proof of safety. So the only way you can build an AI larger than 10 to the 25 flops is if you can prove it's safe before you actually start training it. And that requires a new paradigm. That's like a new way of building AI, because the way we're currently like training these digital brains, it's just, you create this digital brain and nobody has any idea of how it's going to act, right? It's like we're still discovering new capabilities. I mean, last week there was this paper showing that GPT-4 in a specific, agentic runtime setting can automatically, autonomously hack websites. And it was pretty good at this, like doing SQL injections and all this, tech stuff. But this was a capability that wasn't known before. And the GPT-4 model finished training like 18 months ago, right? So it's like this is an example of all these capabilities that we keep discovering so long after these models are trained. Nobody has any idea what's going on inside them. This whole paradigm is just dangerous.
Yeah, totally agree. Do you think like the pause letter is kind of interesting because it does seem like the people that signed it, or like most of them, were like never expecting to get what they were asking for, and also like a lot of what they were asking for obviously would be like totally insufficient. Like, yeah, one like the idea that it's voluntary and that like arbitrary 6 month cutoff, which is like I think a lot of people came out and rightly said like that seems kind of meaningless. Like, why 6 months? What are we going to do in 6 months? What happens
Yeah.
at the end of that period? Whatever. Like, do you think that in retrospect that letter had like, because it did bring a lot of awareness to the problem. So do you think it had like a net positive impact, or do you wish that they'd done it differently?
Oh, it's very hard to say. Like I'm also I'm also very uncertain about things. I'm very grateful that the letter happened. I'm very glad it happened. Like, there's a reason PauseAI has got PauseAI, because I support pausing AI, and I think the letter did so much to get that conversation right going. I do think some details, I would have changed some details. So I would have indeed like skipped over the 6 month thing, and I would have mentioned, international regulation, because you cannot expect any company to voluntarily pause. Like it's just not going to happen. Everybody understands this, I think. But I think that the letter definitely was not good. The reason why I think some of these things were phrased this way, like voluntary, right, and 6 months, is to get more signatures. Because, asking for an international treaty and a ban on AGI above a certain threshold, it's going to raise way more eyebrows. And I think less people would sign it. So I think FLI, was kind of like asking people, hey, what do you think about this? Can we make it more extreme? And they made a balanced call there, I think.
Yeah,
But I'm not
yeah,
sure,
no,
right?
I
I
agree.
wasn't
I
involved in
think
that process.
yeah, no, I know. I'm just kind of wondering. I think the Center for AI Safety statement that was like a few months after that, that one I really like. It's like my favorite one to send to people if I'm trying to prove, if I'm trying to like demonstrate the level of concern amongst people who are like in the know or whatever. then it's a really
Yeah.
useful one to just send and be like, look at all the names on this letter, and it's like a really simple like one line statement. I mean, I guess that also has flaws in that like there's a lot of different ways to like it's quite a wide umbrella of positions that you could get under that statement. Like just saying that mitigating the risk of extinction should be a priority doesn't really call for any specific action. But I think it's like useful for showing people like that this is like a like legitimate concern that like a lot of knowledgeable people have.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very useful. There was also this other
yeah.
survey that's now my favorite, the AI impact survey of last year. Like there was another AI impact survey the year before that, and that's basically asking a lot of publishing AI researchers what their PDOOM is, what their timelines are, stuff like that. And that is showing that the average PDOOM, right, the chance that AI is going to lead to human extinction is like between 14 and 19%. That's the average, right? I'm not many people are sharing this number for some reason, and I find it kind of crazy. Everybody's using like the
I don't
median
know if
number,
I've
which is 5%.
is there. I don't know if I've seen this one because I remember the one that was like it must have been the 2022 one that got quoted a lot in the media because it was something like the stat that was always getting floated around was something like half of researchers put the risk at least 10% or something
Yeah,
like that. So was that the 2022 one? Has there been
yeah, that's the
another one
2022
in
one.
2023?
And the
Yeah.
2023
Okay,
one
that's
had like
interesting.
a little increase on average on how likely people think X risk is.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have to look at that.
And
Yeah.
what's like even
That was
worse is that
interesting.
there's like so many other ways in which AI can go wrong, which is not extinction. So I think if you ask
Mhm.
people like, what other types of scenarios are there and how likely do you find them, that the numbers are becoming even way, way, way worse, right? If
Yeah.
you start looking at cybersecurity risks, biohazard risks, a takeover risks by a human, where like some human or some organization ends up on top and controlling the world, basically, right? That these are also very bad scenarios, but people don't go extinct, so it's not technically an X risk.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah, once you start adding together all of the various ways in which things could be super, super bad,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then you're getting some uncomfortably high numbers for sure. Um, it's interesting that like sometimes I think different people have like different thresholds for being really concerned. Like some people you can be like, oh, people think there's a 5% chance, and like a 5% chance is like already enough to warrant like a lot of attention. Um, but then like others, you'll have to tell them it's like 50 or like, but then there are people that think it's like 90 or whatever, and it's kind of like, yeah, I don't really know because there's such a like diversity of opinion about probabilities, like, and it's really really difficult to have any certainty about them. I never really know whether to use them when I'm trying to persuade people to pay attention because it's kind of
Hmm.
like, well, which one, like, whose number should I go with? Like, there are so many to choose from, and in my mind, like anything above zero is worth paying attention. But like, even for
Absolutely.
me, I'm like, well, I mean, I wouldn't go out like if I thought the risk was say like 1 to 5%. I wouldn't really go out of my way to do anything about it. I would probably wouldn't be tweeting about it. I probably wouldn't be thinking about it all the time. Like that wouldn't it wouldn't move me. Do you know what I mean? It's only because it
Hmm.
seems to be potentially so much higher than that that I spend so much time thinking about it. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's such a hard one because there's nowhere to pin. Like it's just not. Yeah, there's just so little consensus that I don't really know
Yeah,
how to
that's
pitch it to people. Do you know what I
I
mean?
have the same like issue. Yeah, it's pretty difficult because like rationally, if you ask people, hey, would you enter a plane if there's like 1% chance that it will crash? People will be like, no, like 1% of chance of death is pretty horrible. People are go all out their way to like evade surgery that has a 1% chance of like an accident or whatever, right? So I'm pretty sure that rationally people wouldn't do this. And I think if the number gets, I mean, rationally people would be very concerned and do stuff, but emotionally it just doesn't happen. So I think emotionally you need to have a way larger odd that things will go wrong. I think you really need to envision the future going wrong, maybe by default, right? It's like it's a large probability, the largest probability that things go wrong, and then you start to worry and then you start to feel like, okay, we need to do something. If it becomes like the image of how you look at the future. And if I think of the future right now, I can see like a lot of scenarios that go wrong. I can see some scenarios where things go right, but like emotionally, it starts looking. I basically start looking at the negative stuff, and I think that's partly what got me in action. And I think in
Yeah.
terms of probabilities, I think that I have a 40% chance of doom, maybe. That's still, largely optimistic. But if I'm really honest, maybe the 60% of things going right is me trying to have like hope. But the rational
Yeah.
arguments aren't really there. Like the rational arguments definitely point to higher numbers of things going wrong.
Yeah, that's interesting. 40 is pretty, I mean, that's less than 50. I'll take that.
How about yours?
um,
What do you think about if you like intuitively have a number
People,
for this?
yeah, people have asked me this before, and I always like shy away from answering it because like I worry about like for me because I like don't have technical knowledge. Like I worry about people like me like kind of coming up with numbers and it's like I feel like say if I just was like oh mine's 35 or whatever. I feel like there's something about doing that because I don't have that tech background which is like just sort of like worsening the credibility of the entire thing. Do you know what I mean? It's just like making everyone's epistemics a little bit worse if anyone can just stop putting numbers on things.
Hmm.
Um,
That's actually a good
like I don't
point.
know. Like I don't. What I mean is like I don't feel like qualified to say. Like I don't know how I would model it. Like I don't know how I would come up with this number. Like my concern just originates from observing that people who I perceive as more knowledgeable than me are worried, if that makes sense. And I don't really
That
feel the
makes so
need
much
to.
sense, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like I think I've used this metaphor before, but it's kind of like seeing like a bunch of different doctors, and like I have some condition, and they're all giving me like different like survival rates or like different prognoses for my condition, and like because I'm not a doctor, I couldn't personally come up with a number, but like I can still decide what to do or like decide what treatment avenues to pursue or whatever based on being given those numbers by different like professionals, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
um
intuitively it does. Yes, I think maybe the numbers thing is can also be very. It makes it way more abstract, right? Thinking about these numbers, it makes it like very rational, and it makes it play out in this like rational part of your brain. And maybe sometimes we shouldn't do that because it creates like this disconnect. I also think that the way many people are talking about X risk, including myself, by the way, is doesn't match. Like the tone doesn't match the message, right? Like
mm,
I'm sitting here talking with you, and I have a smile on my face, maybe 70% of the time, even when I'm talking about 40% chance that we're all going to die. I think people pick up on this and thereby maybe not really believe it, right? Like there's this mismatch. Why are you laughing? Why are you happy about how can you be happy when this stuff is going on?
yeah, that's a good point. I don't know, but then there's also a risk doing it in the other direction because if you come across like super emotional, like super impassioned, whatever, people are like, oh my god, like these people are hysterical, they're crazy, they're paranoid. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of a
Mm-hmm.
lose-lose thing. Like I also don't really know what the best way to, and I also don't know if it's like productive to try and scare people. Like I'm not really sure about that either. Like I do want to motivate action, but like sometimes people being anxious like doesn't really motivate action. It just kind of gets people to, like you said before, do the like denial thing,
Yeah.
or they just like panic, they don't know what to do themselves, and like they just try to ignore it. So I really don't have an answer for that.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's really
share that
difficult.
doubt. Like, I find it very difficult. Like, emotionally, I would never want to scare anyone. It sucks, right? Being scared is not fun. I don't want people to be scared. But on the other hand, maybe it's required for action, right? Maybe people need to be a little scared. Um, I don't think people should be, scared into paralysis that they stop doing anything and feel powerless. And maybe that is the response, right? If you tell people how bad things really are, that's how they can respond. So I have a niece like 25 years old, and I spoke with her, a year ago, and she was just asking like how I've been doing, and I told her basically, yeah, I'm pretty worried about AI. She said, well, why are you worried? I basically explained to her what I'm afraid is that could happen, right? What I'm afraid of, and she just got a panic attack. Like
Oh my
that was my impact of talking with her, and I felt horrible about this, right? I don't want to scare her, but I also don't want to lie to her. And the truth is that I think the future is scary. Like the
Yeah.
future, well, it isn't scary. It could be very scary, and it's something that we, maybe should internalize. So one thing that I do want to do is scare politicians. I really want political people in power to be scared. So ideally, like only a small group of people in charge will feel like, oh my God, this thing is horrible. We need to act right now, right? They get into action, they internalize the risk, they, have this emotional understanding that they could die and the world is in their hands. This is like a huge responsibility, but they should feel this. And that the rest of the world would just go on, live their day. So ideally, PauseAI wouldn't do a protest, but just speak with politicians and just get them to be convinced, because that way, you wouldn't have to make people scared.
Yeah, I agree. I was also thinking that, like, I have no objection. Most people, I don't want to scare them, but if they're a politician, I don't feel so bad. Like, no objection to scaring the shit out of politicians. I think that's fine, actually. But like you said, it's difficult, isn't it? Because they're motivated by public opinion. They don't care about things unless their voters care about them. Or like, it's hard to get them to care about things unless people care about them. So again, it's kind of it's a bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, there's like
Um,
these selection effects for people to get into politics. I mean, to get into politics, you kind of need to distance yourself emotionally from things, and you need to be very vocal about things that you don't really care that much about, right? Oftentimes,
mhm.
politicians are just very good at also making a point for something they don't necessarily agree with. So you end up with people in power that have, certain personality traits and characteristics that make them more immune to being scared, and
Yeah.
internalizing stuff like this. So yeah, that makes the game a little bit more difficult to play. It's definitely not all politicians, right? But like there is a selection effect.
Yeah. So what do you so just like looking back on like the last year, like I guess there have been like some positive things that have happened. Like in 2023 quite a lot happened. I guess this kind of like went I don't want to say completely mainstream, but like a lot more mainstream than it was before. And we had the AI Safety Summit, and there was that executive order in the US as well, which was pretty interesting. Um, so like, how encouraged are you by those events, or like specifically actually the summit? I'm curious because it's encouraging that the Bletchley Declaration came out of that, but not that encouraging that no like concrete policy proposals came out of it. So like, yeah, how do you kind of feel now that you've seen all of that happen?
Oh wow, well, like so much has happened in the last year, indeed. Like when we started protesting, OpenAI didn't even acknowledge existential risk, right? It was just not a
Mm-hmm.
topic. Um, and now we've got country leaders acknowledging the risks, and there's policy being drafted, and there was a summit organized. So from day one, we've been begging for a summit, right? We've been protesting, like explicitly asking for a summit. And then when Rishi Sunak stood up and said, "Yeah, the UK is going to host a summit about AI safety," I was so stoked. I was so happy that this was happening. This was like the thing, I've been basically working full time towards trying to get that to happen. And the fact that I don't think it had anything to do with my efforts or whatever, but it's very great that Rishi Sunak stood up. But the summit itself, as you said, like it didn't lead to anything. The UK didn't feel comfortable actually proposing policy measures. They didn't feel comfortable starting an international organization, right? Like an IAEA for AI. It doesn't roll off the tongue, but some sort of international organization that could prevent bad stuff from happening. So I felt like UK totally dropped the ball on this, and I'm kind of mad about that. I feel like they have this huge responsibility to make things go well, and right now all they did was like organize the summit, and then basically push it to the next one. And now it's, Seoul is organizing an AI safety summit, but it's supposed to be this mini virtual summit in May. So I don't have a lot of hopes that this could be big and lead to good outcomes. So I'm really, really disappointed that there is no political leader internationally right now standing up and saying, okay, I have this draft treaty proposal. I want signatures for it. Let's tame this beast, right? Where are the adults? It's just so frustrating. So I think
Yeah,
like this
I'm
is up to
wondering if
us.
it's yeah. I think I might have seen this because you posted it in the Discord server the other day. But it was that House of Lords report on like AI risk. Do you know the one I'm talking about? And
Yeah, yeah.
there was like a section on existential risk in there, and they had like these. What did they say? It was something like they thought the risks were like basically certain not to arise in the next 3 years and like highly unlikely to arise in the next 10 years or something. And I was so like, if they're working on that basis, then it kind of makes sense that they're not like, doing anything that draconian at this point in time. But I was just a bit like, where are you getting these numbers from? Like, they're so
Yeah,
specific. And I'm kind of like, how, like, why are you sure? And like, like, I just want to know, like, where do they get that information from? Because, like, if I found out that there's like some experts that they're talking to are like very credible that have like convinced them of this, like, maybe that would be kind of reassuring. And I'd be like, okay, maybe you have a good reason to think that. But like, I just don't see like those experts anywhere. And I don't see those figures anywhere else. So, like, I just think that's very weird.
it is very weird. Like it doesn't match at all what the surveys are showing, what the average estimates are. What is really clear is that people just don't know. It is very, very uncertain. And I think if we look at AI progress in the last year and we look at what state-of-the-art models can do right now, people already should be pretty concerned. Like if we were to like design thresholds or like limits from, okay, if AI does this, then maybe we should be concerned. I think we've hit most of the limits that people can come up with. Can it deceive humans? Yes. GPT-4 can deceive humans. Can it find security vulnerabilities in code bases? Yes, it can find security vulnerabilities in code bases. Can it write software on its own? Yes, it can write software on its own. Can it be, can it outperform humans in many domains? Yes, it can outperform humans in a lot of domains. I think if we're looking at current models, we're already quite close to levels that could be very dangerous. I feel like we should err on the side of caution, and especially politicians. They're playing with every single person's life on Earth. I think the reason why they're saying that it can't happen in the next 5 years, there's like 100% certain that it can't happen in the next 5 years. The reason they're saying that stems from some sort of like psychological need not to feel the responsibility that the whole world is in their hands. Because if you feel that, it's tough. And in a way, that's because I feel it every fucking day and I want to stick my head in the sand, right? It's just so horrendous to think about that if you fuck up, right? If I say the wrong thing to a politician, if I make the wrong impression on a podcast or whatever, I could contribute to there not being a solution to this problem. And just that weight on your shoulders is horrible. So I think the human brain just wants to believe that it's going to be fine. So that if you're asking like where did they get their information, I'd love to know, but my 2 cents is it's probably also somewhere deep in the brainstem.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's weird because like I mean, governments are usually like pretty like pretty risk averse in like most situations, and like very concerned with avoiding like very events that have like very low probabilities of happening, and like they put a lot of
Yeah.
like resources into mitigating threats. Which like doesn't the U.S. government have like a file somewhere that has like what they would do in the event of like a zombie apocalypse or something. I mean, they have like contingency plans for everything. It's kind of like it's kind
Oh,
of incredible that
I
they're
would
just like
doubt that though.
being so obtuse on the. Sorry.
I would certainly doubt it that they have like these plans for all of these scenarios. At least
I don't
that's
think
the
they're like
impression
good.
that I'm
They're
getting.
probably. I don't think they're like good plans, but it's kind of funny that they have them. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I
for
don't. I don't
example,
know
with
whether
COVID, with COVID, there was like
Yeah.
this
No. No.
0.1 increase of mortality, and that was enough reason to just completely shut down the whole country, right? That was like enough reason. Oh
Mm.
man, there's a little bit more people are going to die. Just shut it all down, right? There's this chance. There's so many times other governments are extremely risk averse, but when it comes to this huge, huge, huge issue, I think we're just not psychologically equipped to deal with the urgency of the situation. Like it's exactly as in the movie Don't Look Up, right? There's this group of scientists saying, "Hey, maybe the world's going to end," and it is just people can't hear it. They just can't internalize it. They can't understand that this is actually going on. It's too dark. It's too big. It's too scary, right?
Yeah. I agree. Um, don't have any solution to that. I might see if I can like. It might be useful to just try and find out where this information, or like where their certainty is coming from. Like that I don't know too much about like who produces those reports or whatever. But I'd be very interested to know like maybe there's someone that somebody can get in contact with in the UK government to be like, where did you get this 3 year slash 10 year estimate from, and like why are you basing your policy off of that when it doesn't really seem to have that much backing? Um, I would just love to know. I was going to ask like what's kind of like next for Pause AI. Like, what are your plans going forward?
Yeah, I really want to focus on growing the community and growing the movement. So we're working a lot on getting all the new people who join the Discord server or who join the email list to reach out to them and get them to help with all sorts of projects. So in the Discord server, there's this project section, and I think right now there's like 30 projects, right? Sending emails to politicians, people making a documentary, people doing podcasts like yourself, right? There's many people who are doing things. Protest is part of all these actions, and I think it's the most visible part of PauseAI, but it's only like one small part of this. So what I really want to focus on is just growing the movement, getting more people to take action on their own, and that's what I think is what PauseAI is mostly about. It's about building this community of volunteers who want to prevent this stuff from happening. And
Yeah. What's
yeah.
like something that like anyone could do if they wanted to do something and they don't have any knowledge necessarily or any background? Like,
That's a great question. Like my go-to response to that is sending an email to a politician. Like this is such an underappreciated thing to do. Like people don't acknowledge how powerful this is. I've sent maybe 15 emails or something like that, and I think in 70 or 80% of the cases I got either a positive reply or like an invitation to have a meeting. So many politicians are actually very open to learning about this, to hearing your concerns. They want to represent the people. And if you just invite them and have a chat with them, you can get them to think about this issue. And the problem is that many people don't feel confident enough to do this, right? They feel like, what I can't say anything about this, right? I'm not an AI expert. I'm not a lobbyist. I never spoke with a politician. Who am I to have a chat with them? But politicians actually often appreciate this, right? They're talking to professional lobbyists so often that they really appreciate it that when there's just a normal person talking about their concerns regarding AI. And the advantage that we have is that there is so much literature we can point these politicians to show that it's not just, regular people being worried about AI. It's a lot of scientists who are very, very concerned about this. And politicians should spend more time thinking about the subject. So like just send them an email. We have like an email builder on pauseai.info, and that could help people to write a powerful email with a bunch of useful sources. And we'd like to help out in the Discord. So if you just can spend 1 hour doing this, your impact can be absolutely massive.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I did try doing this myself, and you've like reminded me that I should try it again.
Oh,
Um,
awesome, awesome.
uh, yeah. Okay, cool. Great. Well, I don't know if there's anything else like you wanted to cover. I feel like I kind of covered everything that I thought of, but is there anything else that you want to say while we're here?
Well, I think it's important that we remain hopeful of the progress that we're seeing in terms of how people are waking up to the risks. One specific thing that made me a little bit more hopeful is in fact the Sora model, right? You've seen the OpenAI Sora video generating stuff. And I think this is a very big opportunity for people who are listening to this to maybe do a thing. And here's a theory of change, right? So the Sora model is basically showing that AI can now generate very convincing videos. And right now, all influencers, all people who are making videos are looking at that content and think, wow, this could affect my job, right? This could affect me a lot. And they start to become worried. At this point, they haven't made that many videos about it, but in the coming weeks, I think there's a lot of them who will start thinking about this and write about this and make videos about this. So what I think we could do is reach out to these influencers and convince them that there are even more things about AI that they should be concerned about. And I think if people are concerned about one thing in AI, it's easier to get them to be concerned about other things as well. So
Yeah.
one of the things that I think people could do is not even, if you don't want to write to a politician, you could write to influencers and get them to talk on this subject.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. Yeah, I think there's like a lot of potential in getting like another thing is like celebrities who like are going to be the victims of deep fakes and that kind of thing. Like if we could just get
Yeah.
someone like, Taylor Swift, for example, which pretty ambitious, but like people who like have that kind of like cultural influence, who are going to be like some of the first people impacted by these kind of like video generation things. Just for them to like speak out about it, that would be amazing. I thought it was so funny when
Oh
like
yeah,
the
that would
kind of
be
like
so
Taylor Swift
impactful.
fans, the like Taylor Swift fans and the like AI safety people had that like momentary like little like collaboration moment because everybody was mad that Taylor Swift was getting deepfaked. I thought that was like amazing. I would love more things like that to happen. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
like we
awesome.
need to
Okay.
build more coalitions, right? Many people are worried about AI
Yeah,
for other reasons, and we should make coalitions and find common ground. Uh, not just surrounding experts, right? There's other reasons why we should pause, and I think all these reasons um, should be um, should be shown to people, and we need to find other people who agree with us that slowing down is probably the best thing, and not get obsessed
yeah,
about our own risks and worries.
I agree. Another thing that annoys me is the polarization between people who are worried about AI but just for different reasons, and for some reason those people don't like each other. And I'm kind of like, oh my god, like we all basically want the same thing. Like, why can't we
Yes.
just agree?
Oh, we could have like
So
another
that's
podcast
annoying.
about that. That's like a that's a
Oh
social
yeah,
issue.
yeah. Okay, cool. Do you want to let people know? People probably know where they can find you, but just in case they don't, do you want to tell people, yeah, where they can get in touch?
Yeah, PauseAI.info and press the join button. And there's a Discord link. And I think the Discord is a really really nice place for people to hang out. It's like I think the largest community of people who are worried about AI risks and want to do something about it right now. So yeah, I hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah.